Okay. Ready? Hello, everybody. I'm Assemblyman DePhillips, and this is Assemblyman Rumpf. We're here to do the response. We're here to do the response on behalf of the Assembly Republican Caucus. So I have a few opening remarks, then I'll turn it over to the budget officer for more details and more analysis. So my statement is as follows. No one should be taking a victory lap on this budget for the following three reasons. One, spending continues to move in the wrong direction. Up and up, just like the last 8 years. $60.7 billion, an increase of 75% over the last Christie budget. This is more of the same, and nothing, apparently, has changed. Where are the tax decreases in this budget? Where's the cut to the CBT tax rate, which is the highest in the nation? This is a missed opportunity for this administration. Where's the cut in the sales tax rate? This tax is particularly punishing on regular working New Jerseyans. Overall, this budget is not a win for the people of this state and does not improve affordability in New Jersey. I'll now turn it over to the budget officer for additional comments, additional analysis. We, of course, are here for your questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So, new governor, same old song. We have a governor that apparently is very concerned about deficits. She mentioned deficits several times in her speech. Problem is, the deficit this year, as proposed, is greater than the deficit last year under former Governor Murphy. I don't think Governor Murphy was mentioned by name, at least not nearly as much as President Trump. It would appear that all of the problems that we have institutionally in the state of New Jersey are either from former governors or the President of the United States. I think it's a little bit too early to be deflecting blame to the extent that Governor Sherrill is deflecting blame. What we have been presented with this budget, quite frankly, is a 3.2% increase in spending, $1.87 billion more in spending than last year. If we are concerned about our surplus, if we're concerned about that future rainy day, what's happening with our surplus? It's down to $5.4 billion from $6.7 billion under Governor Murphy. Frankly, we're headed in the wrong direction. We have numerous revenue enhancements, or whatever the new terminology may be. For Republicans, we call it taxes because we call it like it is. When we're talking about the new spending that's in this budget, what we're talking about is new taxes. And there's over, or very close to, $1 billion worth in this budget. Whether it's the elimination on the cap on deductions, whether it's the phase out of the alternate business tax, or whether we're talking about the new healthcare tax on employers with more than 50 employees in New Jersey, that's a small business. Taxes all over the place are increasing. And what do I mean by all over the place? In addition to the examples that I cited, there are plenty of automatic tax increases that are going up again this year, whether we're looking at our tolls, our transit fees, and the list goes on. There are plenty of taxes to talk about. And finally, perhaps some would give Speaker Coughlin some credit for the Stay NJ program as he proposed it several years ago. The first thing that Governor Sherrill does when she comes to office is cut the most significant program for tax savings for our seniors in this state by roughly a third by reducing the amount that one can receive from $6,500 to $5,000 and by reducing the cap from $500,000 to $250,000, we are eliminating a huge swath of New Jerseyans that are anticipating their first check in the mail in a couple of months. Well, unfortunately, we have news for those New Jerseyans. Not only is it their first check, but with Governor Sherrill's plan, it's likely to be their last. And that's really unfortunate. It's time for a different message in the state of New Jersey. We didn't hear that message today. We heard an entirely different message, but it's the same old message that we've heard for the last 8 years. More spending, reduced surplus, more taxes, a more expensive New Jersey for all of us to live in. We have a lot of work to do. Thank you. And questions?
Brian Bergen had introduced a number of bills Monday, yesterday?
Yes.
What day is today? One of them was to get rid of stay and day anchor. It sounds like you said there's too many taxes, but you're not happy about the cut to stay and day. What do you think of Brian Bergen's proposal? We're just cutting anchor and stay and day.
I think if we're going to reinvent the state, perhaps that is a discussion that we can have. But Chris, I don't think very many Republicans would favor the elimination of tax rebate programs.
What do you think about their touting of the record K through 12 spending? What do you think should be done for formula this year?
Well, my understanding is that they are adopting the same policy Murphy had last year, which is no cuts more than 3%, no more increases than 6%. But I'm remembering districts that our members represent, for example, in Ocean County, where Assemblyman Rumpf represents the people there. A 3% cut there would add more pain to an already completely untenable situation. So I don't understand the sort of willy-nilly nature of that policy. Just ask the legislators in Ocean County if they can tolerate another 3% decrease. We're not in favor of that.
Do you support the overall increase in K through 12?
Well, I mean, we support reasonable increases for our districts, right? I fight for the people in the 40th district. We want to see increases. We want to see them be able to stay ahead of inflation for sure as they fund their schools.
But you're basically saying that you would like to see those increases passed down in your districts.
I think there's no reason, I haven't heard any reason why any school district should suffer a 3% decrease, and that's what they're trying to sell at this point.
They cut $250 million in the, I think in this budget they're cutting $250 million of packages that were passed in the lame duck. Any thoughts on that plan to kind of get rid of all that spending?
Yeah, I think we would all agree as a Republican caucus that we need to claw back all of the money that were the supplemental appropriations from the lame duck. And just another word on school funding. I live in Little Lake Harbor Township. Last year, Little Lake Harbor Township experienced a 33% tax increase in its local school alone. There are two districts, a regional for the higher education, 7 through 12, and a primary. The primary school, 33% increase. Tax bills on the average home increased more than $1,000. I didn't truly know that something like that could happen in the state, but apparently it can with banked cap and various other mechanisms and exceptions to the funding law that permitted that kind of atrocity to actually occur. S2 is an atrocity, and we need to abandon it, in my opinion, and start over again. The school funding formula, there is some kind of mysterious compilation of factors in that formula that result in certain districts receiving an exorbitant amount of funding. And the stories you hear about brand new books and laptops being thrown in dumpsters, at the end of the school year, in my view, are real. But so too are the stories of people that are experiencing $1,000 per year and above tax increases by virtue of that failed funding formula. At least we have the stopgap that Chris mentioned of 3% in terms of aid reduction and 6% in terms of aid increases. I think it's an appropriate step to have the stopgap for aid reduction. We should eliminate that top tier percentage cap on increases because for many, many years, too many districts have experienced exorbitant cuts. And now finally, when the numbers present a different picture, whether it be enrollment increases or what have you, if they're entitled to 9% more in funding, they should get it. They should not be capped after having so many years of atrocious school funding reductions imposed on their residents.
A follow-up question to that, what do you think about the Senate Democrats' move to talk about merging some of the districts as a cost-saving measure? What do you all think about that on this side?
I think everything is under discussion.
Listen, conceptually, I think many of our members would support the concept. How it works in practice, the jury's still out on how that would actually work. So it's an idea. It's something that we would consider, but we need to see more details around that.
The governor talked about cutting kind of the pork spending that tends to make its way into the budget. She specifically called out the lame duck stuff, but I think, the Christmas tree items in June, everybody would agree is a big problem. How do you think that Mikie Sherrill will be any different from Phil Murphy in terms of how much of that money gets into the final budget?
Well, we agree with her that pork barrel spending is out of control, and she looked right at the legislature and said, you need to fix this. Yet, she's increasing the state budget by 3.2% in this budget. She even said during her speech, come to me with your ideas on how to cut spending, we'll look at them. Where are the cuts in her budget? The budget, once again, just like the last 8 years, increase after increase after increase, she's increasing it by 3.2%. I don't see the cuts. The area we want to see cuts is in tax cuts. She could have gone further to cut the sales tax rate. She could have gone further to cut the corporate business tax rate. That would bring relief. That would help affordability. So I think she just punted to the legislature in her speech and said, fix pork barrel spending. Let me know what you think about cuts. I'll think about it. So I think that was a missed opportunity, and she certainly could have included more dramatic cuts in her budget, but she didn't.
You said you were in agreement on pork spending theoretically with the governor. Are there any other aspects of the budget that you are in agreement with her on?
Well, I think today's address was not really a budget address. It was a policy address. I think it was an outline of what she intends to do and wants to do in her administration. It sounded more like a State of the State address. There were some proposals that I certainly agree with, like PBM reform. I've been touting that for many years. I think she will get bipartisan support along those lines. What she said about veterans' homelessness, we're all on board with that. Everybody in the legislature stood and applauded that. But those are broad policy prescriptions she is talking about. We are talking about budget sanity, cutting spending, eliminating runaway, basically a freight train of runaway spending. And those ideas were not forthcoming today. So we do look forward to the administration working with the Republican members of the Budget Committee to pare down spending and consider tax cuts that will actually improve affordability in New Jersey.
I have one question about why this response is separate from the Senate response in terms of, you talk about you want Mikie Sherrill to work with the budget officers, but you guys aren't working together here today. So I wonder what's going on there.
We spent a good portion of the day together, and in fact, we were together with the administration for the initial briefing today. I think the Senate Budget Committee members chose to remain on the floor. A little bit more difficult to have a good conversation when you're on the floor with all the inherent distractions. But Let me just make one more point with respect to the cuts that were under consideration. Last year, there was a new fee, a new tax. They called it the transit fee. And essentially what that was an additional tax on small business in New Jersey that not quite $1 billion, I think it's about $960 million. No consideration whatsoever on the part of the Sherrill administration over eliminating what we all thought was a one-year stopgap measure as a result of the expiration or the sunset of the enhanced corporate business tax. That transit fee returns with a vengeance. And when we're talking about small business in New Jersey, we're not just talking about corporations which are indistinct. We're talking about real lives, real men and women across the state of New Jersey that work for these small businesses and that have their own struggles. And when their employer is forced to pay thousands, if not millions more in taxes, that in turn is passed to the employees, and everyone in New Jersey suffers as a result. And what a shame. What a shame it is that Governor Sherrill had to bring in somebody from the state of Pennsylvania in terms of having someone to talk about today. Probably because there are so few people remaining in New Jersey that can legitimately say that they have been treated fairly over the last 9 years in these tax and spend environments that we've been suffering through. And unfortunately, I don't think Governor Sherrill is going to be any different whatsoever than Governor Murphy over the last 8 years.
One question that's, I don't know, if Murphy wasn't here today, what's up with that? Does that mean anything?
You know, it's the first time I saw Governor Christie in quite a while, so it was certainly good to see him. I don't know if there's some informal rule that if you're going to be spoken of in a negative fashion to the frequency that, you know, I don't think you'd see Donald Trump here either. And, you know, that's a good question.
Well, he did appear in the speech, as you know,
Yes.
more than once, more than 18 times, I believe. Someone next to me counted 20. So that's obviously a theme of the governor's administration. But we have some critical policy issues that we would like to see addressed, including, like I said before, cutting spending, cutting taxes. Those are state of New Jersey issues, and I think those should be addressed.
Thank you. There's more notes than I had.
Nice to see you.
Oh, that's all right.